Hello, my lovely listener. I've got a few questions for you. I'm curious if you want to take some time before we start the show to think about them with me. First question. Do you find yourself staring at other photographers' images on Instagram and other places and wonder exactly how they capture such real and natural looking snippets of time? Are you tired of posing people and creating the same old images? Maybe that you've been creating or that you see others doing. Number 3, is your biggest hang-up that people just won't stop looking at the camera and cheesing at you when you are trying to orchestrate organic and honest expressions? Number 4, do you find it difficult to communicate how to be in the moment and instead find yourself telling your clients what to do or having them waiting for you to control their every movement? Or maybe after you've thought about all these things, maybe you're just plain tired of feeling the pressure to have every person in every photo be perfect. If you nodded in agreement to anything that I have said, my friend, I have made you something. It is called Definitely Documentary. If you've been listening to the show for a minute, you know that I'm someone who kind of stands up for what they believe in, and I believe the photography world needs more documentary photographers, particularly in the wedding and family sphere, because documentary is real, honest life as we live it, and we have got to hold fast to these moments in these people as they are. If that rings true for you, keep listening. I want to help you embrace that magic imperfectness that is the essence of what life is. So I've made a 5 video course. It's do it yourself at your own pace, lifetime access. Definitely Documentary is the definitive guide to documentary photography. This is for people who are just getting into photography. This is for people who have been in it for a bit and they're looking for a shift in their work, like the questions that I asked you at the very beginning. This is for people who are really interested in documentary photography and they don't know quite where to start. These 5 videos and a couple of little bonuses, they will take you from A to Z, teach you everything you need to know about composition, about bending the time-space continuum so that you can be in the right space at the right time, mental mindset for your clients and for yourself, and how to find your own perspective in this wild and crazy saturated world of wedding and family photography. If any of this is interesting to you, and I hope it is, click the link in the show notes. It'll take you to the website that gives you the full details. If this sounds like you, then definitely Documentary is, wait for it, it's definitely for you, my friend. It's a mini course that is fun, easy to digest, quick to walk through. I'll take you through every aspect of documentary photography to help you become more knowledgeable, more prepared, and more confident for your next session. Link is in the show notes. And now, on to the show. Hey, crew. Thanks for being here today. You are listening to Bobby B and the Tilt and Shift Photography Business Podcast. Today, I have a wonderful photographer here with us. Her name is Praise Santos McKenna. She is a brand photographer, and she is also a podcaster and a very wonderful person to talk to. She has so much insight about how to effectively and I want to say funly brand yourself. I know funly's not a word, but maybe we can make it that way. She is super enthusiastic and extremely knowledgeable, but breaks it down into such helpful tidbits of information that even someone like me, the slowest of all learners, can totally understand and actually get really excited about branding. So I am stoked she is here. Welcome to the show, Praise Santos McKenna.
Bobby,
Praise, we made it.
so good to see you.
Yeah, you too.
How's your day going?
It's good. Did you get my email?
Uh-uh.
I was having so listeners, Praise and I met a little while ago and I forgot to hit record on our session. So this is a little bit of a redo, but I think it's just another opportunity to chat with Praise. But I just signed into Zoom to do the call and Zoom wasn't working. Like totally wasn't working. So I'm like, well, here we go again. The universe does not want us to share our conversations. Maybe they're just between you and me.
I know. It just wants us to hang out, which I'm okay with that.
I'm totally fine with that.
That is so funny. No, I didn't get your email, but it's also one of those just classic Murphy's Law of like, oh, what else can go wrong for these two? Let's make it all happen right now.
They're adaptable, dependable women. They can figure it out.
Exactly. We know what to do.
Oh, San Francisco. It looks beautiful there today.
Yeah, let's see if we can peek out my window a little bit. That's a really nice do you like oysters? It's a nice oyster restaurant out there if ever you come. I'm slightly sensitive to seafood, so I like can enjoy the culture. I can't partake, but usually they have like good bread at those places, so
Yeah.
I'm fine with that. But it is a beautiful day here. It's one of the warmest days of the week here, which is a balmy like 70 degrees Fahrenheit. It never gets too hot here, so it's very pleasant here most
I
of
don't
the
know what
time.
that means in Canadian, 70 degrees. I think it's maybe like, I should have an app
Maybe
on my calculator. Maybe like 20-ish, 25. Like, can you wear shorts outside?
I'm wearing right now shorts like overalls. I'm wearing like a little layer like this and then shorts. So yeah, maybe that's a better way to do it. There used to be an app that was so good. It's like what would Beyonce wear in this weather? And
Oh,
that's actually what it would
wow.
show you instead of showing you the temperature. Like what kind of weather is it outside? What would Beyonce wear? And like is it a raincoat? Is it like layers? Is it shorts? Is it like a bikini? We
Yeah.
need to just talk in more practical terms.
I think that is much more practical. Like, what is 100 degrees? I don't know, but I know that I would not be wearing very many clothes.
Yeah.
Or
It
Beyonce
looks
wouldn't
like,
anyways.
yeah, exactly. Like, what would Beyonce? Maybe we should just have her phone number, text her, and like, okay, what does 70 degrees mean to you? What would you wear? And translate that to Celsius for our Canadian
I
friends.
think she would be cool with that.
Yeah, I would like to believe so.
I
It
always
looks like
wonder.
you're wearing a sweater, though. That
Yeah,
means,
it is it's sweater weather up here in Canada.
okay.
Let's see, what would the temperature be? Sweater weather.
Mm,
So it is like the plants. I just planted a bunch of seedlings and they're very unsure.
ah,
Yeah, it's chilly. Like my hands are cold. Yeah.
yeah, okay. I understand that. I feel like it must be 50 Fahrenheit. That's what I'm guessing. That's what I categorize that. That's like how it is in the morning here, where I like have to wear quite a few layers. Like I'm wearing a beanie most mornings here in San Francisco.
Yeah, I nearly wore a toque this morning. Or
Smart.
a hat. What other words do we have for headgear? Beanie, toque, hat.
I like nodded my head when he said toque, but I was like, what does that mean?
What is she talking about?
I was like, in context, I feel like my other Canadian friend has mentioned it, but your toque. So that is a beanie, right?
Well, okay, is a beanie is a beanie a toque?
Yeah,
Is it
that's
like
true.
is it
It's
like a
like,
winter wool like the brim is kind of like flipped up and it's almost like a sock for your head.
yes, exactly.
Okay.
That's what I call a beanie.
Okay.
But I don't know. I've never heard other names for it too. So what's it? TOOK? Toque?
It should be that, but it's no, we make it more challenging. It is TOQUE. It's French. I presume.
Oh yeah,
It's
a
QUE.
toque.
A toque.
A
I think we should
toque.
change it to toque. We should rebrand to toque.
Yes, to the toque. Like it's toque weather for sure.
Listeners of the Challenge Photography Podcast, this is going to be like our own little vernacular. If we'll know if you're in the club if you're wearing a toque.
If you're wearing a toque, we're just gonna give you one of these head knots. Yeah,
Welcome.
welcome. I see you exactly.
So what's going on in your life, Praise? Are you trucking along? Are
Today,
you in the middle of a shift? What's happening?
yeah, I'm like here in in body, but I don't know if my mind's fully here. It's one of
Yeah.
those days where you're just like, okay, let me think of the few things I have to do today and just show up for those. So that's kind of the space I'm in. My okay, I made these commitments. We can gear up and show up for these, but I think my mind just wants to like think. I was just staring at the window for a little bit while I was eating lunch. I'm like, you know what? I just need to do a little bit more of this. And I think it's just like some health stuff. And, just like a few times a month, I just need to not be on fully all the time. I just need to be a little like on a scale of 1 to 10. My therapist says, Praise, you need to do more underdoing instead of overdoing it. Just try
Oh.
underdoing it. This is one of those days where I'm like, okay, I'll take that to heart.
Yeah, and that is a tough one to push against, right? Because late stage capitalism and the constant requirement of just the expectation to be producing
Hmm.
all the time, I get like severe guilt. Like it's almost like I wouldn't say maybe severe is not the right word, but almost like double checking myself to see if like should I be doing something? Like am I missing something? Do you get that?
Totally. You're like, okay, I'm about to sign off for the night, but should I do these 5 things first before I do that? Or, wow, I actually finished my
17
whole
items.
list, but there should maybe on my to do list now is to add more things to the list too. And you're like, what am I
Yeah.
doing?
Yeah. Are you so that is like the underpinning of hustle culture. And I was actually just talking with another person about this. Hustle culture is still a thing, right?
I think so. I'd like to say, well, not I'd like to say, from my observations, I feel as if there are still people working very hard in an unnecessarily type of way.
Okay, so here's a provocative question. If you don't have a period in your life, because I think people enter into hustle culture particularly when they're in their 20s, like when they're getting their career started, like they're just
Mhm.
kind of moving into it. Um, and then obviously for some people it just continues their whole lives and they become what's later termed as a workaholic.
Mm.
Um, correct. Am I do you think that do you
That's what
agree?
I would track
Okay.
with, yeah, that term.
Okay. Um, but like if you don't have that period of like intense learning and productivity and like energetic output, like do you think it's required? Like from a like a learning perspective?
I don't think it's a required thing. I think that people will just do just fine in the world. Some folks, I feel like there's a spectrum, right? And what we're talking right now is like workaholic, overachieving, hustling over here. And
Mhm,
then the extreme opposite of that is like not even just laziness, but also just even codependency on other people of just like really benefiting off other people versus doing something your own self. Whereas, like, here, I think a good balance is knowing your strengths and your weaknesses and being open for help and also helping others and being open to work and also being open to rest. I feel like this is the
mhm,
balance here too. So I don't think this
mhm,
is the requirement, but I do feel as if most people will be shifting back and forth on the spectrum and need to be pulled a little bit left and right so that after a while the pulls don't become so extreme, but
mhm,
they're kind of here. But
mhm.
this is more ideal because I do feel like there's probably nature versus nurture. There's probably some people whose personalities that is just they're high energy, they really want to do it. And there's
Mhm.
people who are really wired just to like have fun. And I
Yeah,
love that about them too. And then
yeah,
I also think their families and their communities will also encourage that narrative, either
yeah.
or. But to answer your question, I don't think it's required. I feel like kind of the
Well,
middle is what we aim for.
we do learn some good stuff in there though, like boundaries, limits, what we're capable of.
Mhm. Mhm. Where are you?
I am used to definitely be a hustler, but the reason I'm kind of asking this is because I'm also contemplating like through different periods of our life, we go through and I think it's age related. stages where you're kind of unable to learn something until you get enough have enough experiences to realize like, oh, this is the thing I have to learn. Like it's something like, like when you're in your early 20s, um I don't know, you're not aware of how your actions are often um like the long-term outcome of some of the choices you're making. And you also kind of don't, a lot of us, I certainly didn't care about what I was doing when I was like 18, 19, 20, like until I was probably 24. And then I was suddenly like, oh, hold on a second. Like these things are cumulative. And then I suddenly felt like there's a big shift in my like perception of the world at that time. And I think that's like developmental. I think I have read that like developmentally these things happen. Um we need a psychologist on this conversation, Grace. But like
Totally.
I think that also happens in our work. If you haven't had the experience to know that this is not the way to do it, or there are healthier ways to do it, you're going to have a period of your life where you are hustling. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to figure out developmentally, not that you want the child to like touch the stove to then know that it's hot, that it shouldn't do it anymore. But for some children, they might have to get kind of close to the stove to realize for that
Yeah.
reaction to pull back too. And yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I'm hearing from you too. It's just like sometimes you have to hustle a little bit and get kind of close to burnout to be like, oh,
Wait a minute.
this isn't going to work. This isn't sustainable. I don't like the way this feels. And it actually doesn't help me in the long term. So for
Mm-hmm.
you to start catching yourself more, I think
Mm-hmm.
that's real. Well, there's also the theory that there's some folks who learn by experience and some folks who learn by example. Some
Mm.
folks can kind of just witness it in other people and be like, I can almost empathize, sympathize so much with them that I can pull back a little bit. That's the hope. And I hope folks in this podcast can kind of gain that too. So they're saving themselves from pain, headache, stress too. But
Yeah.
oftentimes, some people will have to experiment it for themselves since limits are often dictated by each person's capacity too.
Yeah. Where are you on that spectrum? Did you go through a hustle?
For me, so it's interesting because one part of that theory holds true in that I'm pretty good at observing. I'm a younger sibling, so I feel like I could watch my sister do some things, and I was like, oh, well, that was either rewarding or that had
Mm-hmm.
consequences, and I could learn from that.
Mm-hmm.
But in business, I feel as if I'm actually more in the spiral category of having to learn things in different ways, where there are times where this is the lesson I have to learn about hustling and burnout. And then I kind of learn it. And then here's the lesson I have to learn about scarcity versus abundance. And this is the
Mm-hmm.
lesson I have to learn about delegation. And I kind of like learn it in this season. And then I'm like, okay, now I have to learn this and this. And then it comes back where it's not the same thing of like, oh, I hustled because I launched a new leg of our business. Actually, now I'm hustling now, creating too much content. And I'm still having to learn that same lesson, but in a more cyclical way, if that makes sense too. So I'm both, I should be learning from example of even just my past self, but I almost have to re-experience some of it just to be like, oh, yeah, I don't,
Right.
I don't like it. But I will say I am better at just some of these lessons are related in that yeah, it's starting to remember that I have been given so much and we are more abundant. So I also don't have to hustle as much. Also because I've delegated more and have
Mm-hmm.
trusted the abundance to pay those people I've delegated to. That I
Mm-hmm.
also don't have to hustle so much and they get to be in their sweet spots. I get to be in my sweet spots too. But there's
Mm-hmm.
always still like little mini lessons of it here and there. I don't know if I'm ever done learning it, but maybe it doesn't take me as long to like sit in that module.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. And so, and two, it's also taking me so long to have no shame around it as well. Cause I think that's also the
Mm-hmm.
cultural part of it that it's here in the West, like it's so admired to be hardworking and diligent, etc. Whereas I am now giving myself more words of, I'm really proud of myself for taking a real weekend where we slept in and we didn't have much on the agenda. And we just kind of asked ourselves, what do we feel like doing?
Mm-hmm.
Not that it'll be productive or check anything off, but just because it would feel nourishing to us. And removing that shame aspect from it and learning to have conversations with myself and tuning in a little more of what does my mind need? What does my body need? What do I
Mhm.
need? And so
Mhm.
I'm also learning and gaining new pathways in my head that are anti hustle and that are more pro rest.
How are you learning that? Or how did you discover that you needed to learn that?
Mm, yeah, I think the last time when we talked, which it wasn't recorded, so it was a private conversation between Bobby and I, and it will forever live
Good.
in infamy in my head. It was amazing. But I think we were chatting about this topic too, and I think I might have told you that I was just going to take myself away for the weekend. I think
Yeah,
I just
yeah.
was taking myself away just for 24 hours because I needed it. Because
Yeah.
a few things I could find myself being short with people, like more irritable. I could find myself dreading things in my business that I'm usually really energized by. I found
Mhm.
myself not having new ideas about things that I'm usually inspired by and that are more my creative zone of genius. And I could just tell I was tired. And
Mhm.
so, uh, I think I'm learning the symptoms and the warning signs more early on. And I'm learning if I find it more early on, maybe it's like 24 hours at a little town about an hour away from home. And the recovery process is faster versus like I stay in that zone for months and months. And then I also need months and months of recovery too. And so it's
Yeah.
almost learning how to balance myself on the back and forth so that the range again isn't so big. It becomes like a little smaller and I become more sensitive to the ways that I'm like, feeling a
Mhm.
little off. Yeah, maybe I don't need now a full 24 hours. Maybe I just need an hour during lunch to stare out the window, resettle my nervous system, recalibrate a little bit too.
Mhm.
Uh yeah, that's kind of where I am right
I love that you're saying that because I think, like even just as you were talking in the back of my head, my little lizard brain was saying like, well, if you don't address it now, then you'll have to do it later, you know? And that like for me, that's really a driver of, I wouldn't say that I'm a hustler anymore, but certainly I did it for long enough that those neural pathways are thick, wide, smooth roads are like leading me directly to those thoughts and those behaviors. And it's taken a long time to really change them. But what you're touching on is um, we still, and this is something that I think people get confused about when we say that hustle culture is bad or whatever, that you shouldn't do it. It's um it dulls, if we don't pay attention, it dulls our ability to sense when we are in it. And really stops us from being able to understand how to pull ourselves out of it. And like just how you were
now.
describing, being able to think, okay, what do I actually need? Like, what are the symptoms of this? I'm not feeling very creative. I'm short with one of my coworkers. Like, there's something deeper going on here. And those are lots of behaviors that we tend to ignore or like smooth over. Um, and then also realizing that the sooner you address it, the less like recovery time, you don't go as deep and you don't have to go as sorry, like you don't go as deep into the hustle culture or like the that frantic desperation or pushing, like grinding, stone grinding, whatever you want to call it. You don't go as deep into it for as long, and then it's easier to pull yourself out, right? So like an hour staring out the window, as much as my brain was like, oh my god, what could I be doing within that span of hour, I'm like, oh wait a minute, if I just let myself do that, then I actually will get those things done that I need to get done. Like, it's funny that you're bringing this up because today I have been dragging my feet. Like, I'm trying to write a sales page for a new course that I'm doing, and I just want to pay someone tens of thousands of dollars to do it for me. And I know that it's something that I can probably do. It'll probably take me like a couple of hours, and it wouldn't be like financially responsible for me to just like give it to someone else. But I'm don't I'm catching myself in the lack of wherewithal to just like rest, like to accept that this is how I feel and that it's okay for me to just hug my dog for a minute or like
Mhm.
the whole day, and that will be okay.
Which is so ironic because I feel as if a lot of us go into business for ourselves, start our own small businesses because we want autonomy, because we are over that like boss telling us, here's a deadline, do this, where is this thing? And then we just adopted it into our own small business culture of like, we told ourselves we would get this sales page done today. We're gonna do it. And I get that. I feel like it even actually just feeds the more malaise. Is that the right word of just like, I
Yeah.
want to do it too,
Yeah.
instead of just actually, you might just need some dog time. You might just need some, that's your source of inspiration. But truly, it
Yeah.
probably is a thing that calms you, that balances out your nervous system and turns off your lizard brain so that your wise mind can come on. And you probably need more wise mind to write a sales page than you need a reactive brain too, right? So
Yeah.
it's both scientific, but it's also not, it doesn't seem like the first solution or the most practical solution. Is that you want to go far, you have to almost kind of step back and go a little
Hmm.
slower and wiser too.
Hmm.
But I have been there, Bobby. I have very
Hmm.
much been there. And we're just like, I told myself to do this thing. I probably should rest, but no, what if I just push through even more?
Yep. To all listeners, stop pushing.
Yes. Are
Yeah.
you by chance, did you watch Parks and Recreation, the TV
Oh
show
my
when it
God.
was out?
I loved it's one of my favorite shows by far, like heads and shoulders above everything else. Yes.
Well, my husband and I are rewatching it because we weren't together when it first came out. So we watched it separately. And it's
Uh-huh.
such a comfort show. So we're
Yeah.
binging through. We're at season 3, and there's this episode where the Harvest Festival just finished, and they need to think of their next new idea. So Leslie Knope takes them all camping. So we're going to brainstorm my new idea, and everyone's asking her, just tell us what your idea is because your idea is going to win. And she's like, I actually have no idea. That's the truth. And she's freaking out. And so
Yeah.
she just pulls an all-nighter at a B&B. She's trying to do, and then Ron Swanson finally just like locks her in a room and just like, you've been working for years. Just rest. And you can see her peeking through the window at the top. She's like, oh, it's including. And so it just cuts scene to the next day where they're in the city manager's office and she comes in there and she's like, sorry, I'm a little late. I actually slept 7 hours last night, which is double the amount of sleep I usually get. And here are all my ideas. And she starts listing them off one by one by one by one, which so many things there. Leslie Knope was one of the
Yeah.
most lovable characters that has ever been written for television. And
Agreed.
she's
Yep.
so fully herself and in her power too, which running a Parks and Rec department is her sweet spot. But even Leslie Knope gets tired. Even the
Yeah.
Energizer Buddy needs some rest. She needs some R&R for her to keep going to. And so if rest is good enough for Leslie Knope, do it too.
Yes. It's got to be good enough for us.
Yes.
That's a really good metaphor though, because if we think of if you're someone who struggles with this or like, am I pushing too hard? Am I not doing enough? Like, because the beauty in not having a boss, as you mentioned, is like you have just ultimate freedom. You get to just do whatever you want whenever you want. And this is something that I often say to my students. I'm like, you get to do whatever the F you want. They're like, what should I do? I'm like, whatever you want. And they're like, oh my God. Like, yeah, it's great. But then also like you go out into the field of possibilities and then you're like paralyzed by possibility, and then that can like totally make you slide into the mud bog, right? So if the hustle is the charming Leslie Knope, um, maybe Ron Swan, like if you need to characterize things in order, like I love visualizing stuff like that, like the dialogue in my head, it would be Leslie Knope versus Ron Swanson. I really appreciate that you bringing that up because I can start checking myself with that now.
Yeah, these are symbols that speak to Bobby. These are symbols that make sense. Yeah, we just need the Ron Swanson in our life who is that
Oh,
steady force who only wants the best for us, but will tell us hard truths of just relax, just
yeah.
rest. Remember why you're doing this too. His mustache face. I just need to make you a little meme for
Yes,
letting
he's
me
so
that
good.
reminder.
How did you end up choosing brand photography, Praise? Because honestly, I could listen to you talk about brand photography all day. Some people just have like that voice and the calming knowledge, and it just sort of like pours over you. Before I met you, I didn't love brand photography, and I shouldn't say I didn't love brand photography. I didn't love the idea of brand because I thought that it was really pigeonholing. Because I was just mostly just ignorant about it. Like I just didn't understand what that. I thought brand meant light, airy, and taupe. Like those were my ideas of what brand was, and I wasn't
Beige
that, and
mom.
therefore beige mom, and therefore I didn't. I'm not even a mom, and I didn't even like. I'm like, no, all of those things are not me. So you like breathe this enthusiasm and um um like I don't want to say knowledgeability. That is the word that's coming to my brain. But like you're so knowledgeable about it that you say it in words that are interesting and like accessible and they don't sound like beige mom. So, how did you come to brand photography? Because you're now coaching it and you now have a podcast about it, branding your business podcast. But I love hearing you talk about it. And so that's why I'm bringing this up.
Well, I am glad that you find it interesting because I will say on the surface, for the niches that we find ourselves in, documentary and brand are somewhat on the opposite sides of the spectrum. Brand has a
Mhm.
lot to do with intention, and documentary tells a story of what's there. Brand is like a lot of planning and production, whereas documentary is very storytelling, right? It's just what
It's
exists there
reactionary.
too.
Yeah.
Yes. But I feel like you need a little bit of both in any industry, in
Hmm.
any field too, because brand is truly what people think, feel, and say about you. And brand photography is a tool to help communicate that. But it's only one tool, I hope, in folks' toolboxes that they use to cultivate their brand. Just because we know innately, I think our BS meter knows when someone's being real and when they're being not real. And what
Hmm.
we help people do when we coach them, when they're in our mastermind, is one, actually just figuring out who they are, this business they lead,
Hmm.
what values they have, both personally and in their business, the vision they want to see for the world, and how can they authentically communicate that in different mediums, whether they're showing up somewhere in person, whether it's the visuals they have on their website or on their social, whether it's the podcast they produce, the voice that they use for that, whether it's copy on a sales page. It's just
Hmm.
having some clarity of who you are. So, in that sense, it is documentary and storytelling. It is what's real, but it's just giving you some guidelines so that it seems consistent, so that folks' BS meters won't go off if you're
Hmm.
saying something that's off brand, right? And it's just a very clear message moving forward. So I didn't just stumble upon that, or I just didn't like set out like, I'm going to focus on brands and this is going to
Yes.
be my thing. It was a huge discovery process of what do I like? What gives me energy? Who do I like to work with? And it was very evolutionary in that sense, and it's still evolutionary in that I'm constantly checking in with myself. Does this still give me a lot of life? Can I talk about it to my friends in an authentic way where
Mm.
I just get to talk about what I like, and I'm really glad it's inspiring and helping people too. And will how long will I continue to do this, or will God put something else in my path that also gives me energy that also relates to this too? Because I started when I started in photography back when I was 16 years old. I started by
Mm.
stealing my sister's camera, and I just wanted to make something pretty. I wanted to capture a little something and show it to the world, or even just keep it for myself. But over time, other people found my photos of snow globes in my room and asked me to take pictures for them. And they thought it would be a good idea for a 16-year-old to take their engagement photos, which bless them.
Oh.
I see you. I see your faith in me. And I'm like really grateful for that youth leader who thought that was a good idea. And then they told their friends. And so before I knew it, I was making great pocket money for this thing that I really liked and this thing that I truly just stole from my sister. I just kept on borrowing her camera. And then when I went to college, I studied organizational communications with a focus in the nonprofit sector. And I did community work right out of college. And I did love the aspect of investing in people, but I needed to have more of a creative bend in it. And I also didn't like to work for other people, kind of as we mentioned before. I really thought it was a human right that people should be able to vacation and visit their family whenever they want. But they gave me 10 business days to do that throughout the whole
Yeah.
year.
Side note, that is bullshit.
Truly, I'm like, this is not how humans flourish and thrive.
Yeah, you work 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, and you might get 10 days off. Like,
Nah.
no,
Yeah. I
no,
wasn't for it. I was like,
walking
these
away.
chains, loose me. I didn't like it. I almost wanted to. And my bosses were actually great and did trust me. It was kind of this system where I wanted to almost tell a system, I always get my work done and I always go above and beyond getting my work done. I am someone that you can trust to care for
Mhm.
this thing, but there's a system that I can't tell it to trust me, to give me 12, 14, 15 days off, and I'm still going to produce and overproduce for you too. I just
Yeah,
was like, "Ugh, I can't do this anymore." So
yeah.
I knew I needed to work for myself and I still wanted to do work that would impact people, but I
Mhm.
wanted to bring in this part of me that I knew I was wired for of creating beauty and seeing what beauty was and showcasing it and using different tools to showcase it to the world. And so I kind of did a lot of things. I did photography, I did graphic design, I did brand ambassadoring. I also lovingly love to point out that for a while when I was launching my business, I was also helping give out samples of ketchup and mustard at Whole Foods. And I just was also like, "Ooh, would you like to try this?" This is also
Really?
part of my story. Yes, it was. Bless all the people who are on street corners giving out samples. Those are people who are in their 20s hustling and learning the value of hard
No
work.
kidding. What
Truly.
made you do that? I have 2 questions.
I know so much about it. I still know a lot about them. Shout out to Sir Kensington. It's a great ketchup company.
What were you, like, drawn to it, or was this just, like, a means to an end sort of thing, or was there, like, contacts you were trying to make or
Yeah, it
practicing
was just
skills?
kind of a means to end. It was like an hourly job that paid like $20, $25 an hour. I had rent
What?
to pay. And I just was like, oh, yeah, I didn't have like a set schedule. I could just like take on shifts at a Whole Foods for like 5 hours here and there, make 100, $125. And I'm like, okay, this isn't bad. I literally just have to smile on people and give them like juice samples or ketchup samples or something. But it
Mhm.
was tough. It was tough on my ego just because I would have, I don't know if it was judgy or caring, but I remember having a really big wake up call when this older gentleman came up to me and really like he was giving me like dad vibes. I could tell he was
Mm.
seeing me like I'm probably the age of one of his kids. And he was like, "So this is like good ketchup. Also, did you go to school?" I'm like, "Yes, sir. Actually, graduated a couple years ago and I'm like launching my business. So I'm doing this in the meantime to like kind of bootstrap and fund my business." And I feel like I had to defend myself
Yeah.
while also like just first asterisk, girl, I know you worked at a grocery store too. Like those are legit jobs. And I'm so grateful for everyone in the service industry too. So
Oh my
one that was
god,
like, I don't know if he meant
absolutely.
it in a judgmental way, but I'm like, this is a legit job. Like I'm paying for myself and like my livelihood this way. But
Yeah.
two, like I knew I needed to do this so that I could still shoot photos for like $200, $300 and eventually do it more so I could start raising my prices to 1,000, 3,000, 4,000, $8,000 too.
Mhm.
But I had to start somewhere too. So I went from like kind of hustling, doing all these kind of jobs to finally like photography was starting to take off more. But then I was
Mhm.
just kind of doing everything in photography, real estate photography, baby showers, weddings.
Mhm.
And then I had the privilege of being able to ask myself, okay, we are getting burnt out trying all these things. What are the things that I don't come home achy and tired of? What are the things that help me feel more energized? And working with businesses and entrepreneurs just because it felt like this. I felt like having a conversation and I also had a camera and could creative direct at the same time. I left
Mhm.
home feeling like I was loving people well and making pretty things. So then I wanted to focus on that more. And
Mhm.
branding really helps me get to know people, helps me understand what their values are, what they want to create in the world. And I get
Mhm.
to help them communicate that. So that is a few minutes that really encapsulated about a decade of building a business and just being curious about, okay, what is that thing that gives me energy? Okay, who are those people I really love to serve? Let me
Mhm.
like kind of niche down that feeling that I give them and also that feeling I give myself. And let me just continue to chase that and follow that. And so even with the podcast, uh, Kristen, a woman that we both know and love, encouraged me to do it like early on, but it took me about a year to do. I'm like, there's just no energy there yet for me, Kristen. I have to wait till it's there. But thank you for planting the seed. And then after a while, I was like, okay, I think I'm ready. I think there's energy there. And it's so fun getting to chat and have
Yeah.
conversations like this and being able to answer questions that people ask me all the time, but in podcast/video form. And so that's
Mhm.
where the energy is right now, too. And yeah, I just keep on stumbling upon more things that give me energy. And I'm like, well, this sounds fun. Let's like implement it into the business.
Mhm.
Yeah. That's a little bit of my story.
Well, one of the first things that sounded like you really stumbled on was this desire to make beautiful things, or you were curious about beauty, maybe, which is why you were seeking to capture it. What do you think it is? Like, what is it? This is a kind of a hard question, or maybe it isn't, but like, what is it about beauty that you chose to build a life on it?
Yeah, for me, it is one of my personal values, one of my top values, just because beauty can also be synonymous with awe. It's that feeling of something stops you in your tracks and it just makes you ponder and think. It helps invoke gratitude. It brings you
Mhm,
back to a special place. It can also give you goosebumps. It's it has the power to do so many things. It can put a smile on somebody's face too. But what
mhm,
beauty is and what's so interesting, it's so subjective too. There could be mainstream beauty, but truly what I think is beautiful, what you think is beautiful could be very, very different things. But we
yeah,
can have a conversation about it and we can talk about why we think this is really beautiful. Or through art and being an artist and being a creative, you can frame something and show people, hey, this is what I think is really beautiful. Even when it's me taking a picture of someone else who doesn't think they're beautiful, but being
mhm,
able to show them and rewrite a story of like, hey, but this is how I see you,
mhm,
that's really powerful. And
yeah,
that's such a cool gift to be able to create and do. And so when I don't get to do that for a while, my hands are itching like to do something. And it doesn't have
mm,
to do with my business sometimes. So I'm like, I just want to play with Play Doh. I just want to sketch something. I just want to go on a walk and see light coming through trees. I just ache for something. Some people are like that with music. I like
mhm,
music, but how I talk about visual art, some people talk about music too. And I just like, oh, I love that God
mhm,
created you, that you are wired just with that inkling. Like their fingers hurt if they aren't allowed to strum a guitar for like a week or two, right? Whereas my fingers hurt if I don't get to like create or see something beautiful in a while. I
mhm.
just love it. It really gives me life.
Was it like that even when you were little? Like little? You
Uh,
said you mentioned this right around the age of 16.
yeah, but in different ways, in that I would always want to reorganize my closet maybe like every 2 weeks. And I would just leave the doors open and I would just look at it. And I'm like, "Ah, it makes
So
sense now that
satisfying.
I stacked
Yeah.
my t-shirts that way." You know? And I just was like, oh my gosh, I'm like the weirdest little 12-year-old right now. But and like no one forced it upon me. I just knew I liked it. Like
Yeah.
you like what you like. And so, yeah, there were different things like that that I just was like, oh, I just have like a propensity to kind of create and to craft and
Mhm.
wanting to make things that they bring me joy and maybe they'll bring joy to other people too.
Do you think branding is moving those urges and those desires that have always kind of been innate to us? Is it moving it from like the subconscious up into the conscious plane? So then you're like verbalizing it and
Mm,
you're intentionally putting it in front of people?
a little bit. I think what I actually really like the most about branding is helping folks discover what their values are and how it overlaps with the values of their audience, the people they're liking, they're wanting to appeal to or talk to, or the people who really give them energy, and making it a little more explicit and intentional. And so that's
Mhm.
almost subconscious just because not everyone is going around saying, like, oh, what is your coffee order and what are your life's values? You know, it's not as direct. It is more of subconscious of like, wait, what is important to me? What are those
Mhm.
things that matter to me that really speak to me, that energize me? And I wonder the people I attract or I want to attract, what are their values? And let me think about that a little more. I think that's my favorite part about branding is actually conversing with people, taking them through a few frameworks and exercises so they have that like light bulb idea of just like, oh, this is important to me. This is the feeling I want to exude,
Mhm.
or rather, this is the impact I want to make of the world on the world. I want more of this in the world, right? I want more
Yeah.
stories in the world. I want more beauty in the world. I want more listening and being cared for in the world. That's a deep
Mhm.
value of mine. Let me see if I can communicate that in the copy I write for a sales page or through imagery, etc. And so
Mhm.
it's subconscious, but doesn't have to stay subconscious. I think our world would be a really wonderful place if values became more conscious, if brand in that sense became more conscious.
Mhm. I always ask my guests about moments in their life where they had like big shifts in awareness or in how they see the world or how they do business. But do you see that regularly as you walk your people through these exercises?
I feel as if the question, and this can be for your listeners too, because I know that there's a big notebook portion of this podcast too. Very practical. Professor Bobby, I feel like is guiding
It's
you all very well.
my monocle.
Yeah. Okay, well, now to our notebook section. Uh, the question that folks can ask themselves are, who are the heroes that I admire and why do I admire them?
Mm,
That's a lot more of a pointed question than what are your values? Because if you look at heroes, your
mm,
heroes are going to be different from my heroes, and your reasonings, even if we pick the same hero, might be different. And that starts to pinpoint of, wow, I realize that some things are, for example, let's break this down. Like, say someone says, oh, my hero is my grandmother. Why is your grandmother your hero? Because she was generous with her
mhm,
time, with her home, with her money, etc. And then they start to think about it too. Oh, the other people I like, whether it was a professor or my best friend, one of my favorite things about them is because they're generous too. Or I realize that that's a value I really like and I'm proud of when we're able to give things away as well. And they start to see this in their life, and they can also see the opposite. If you ask people, um, when are times that they feel like they were stressed or they felt out of alignment, was that value present? And often it wasn't. And so it's
mhm,
a really good way of like, oh, those that I admire, and where are times that I feel stress or tension, was that value there? You can realize that it probably wasn't, and helps clarify, oh, because that value wasn't being expressed in the stressful moment of my life. That's why I was stressed too. Right. And so it's a really interesting, both like psychology and self awareness piece, for people to get to know themselves better. And that's kind of the aha moments I see for people when I'm coaching them to like, okay, so who are your heroes? Tell me more about yourself. So I get to sit there, I get to listen to them more, and they get to just be like, oh my goodness, there's a pattern here. I see why this is so important to me.
yeah. Who are your heroes, Praise?
Who are my heroes? I do think of my grandmother. She is one of my top one, and I've been thinking about her a lot lately. In that, I feel like grief is also something really cyclical too. Even though she passed away um, 4 years ago, I think about her often. In that she was someone who was really forgiving. My grandfather, bless him, and like a lot of grandfathers in the Filipino culture of that generation, there was just like some tough family
Mhm.
issues. Then he had basically a second family besides like my dad and his siblings too. And my grandmother still adopted and raised as her own children that my grandfather had outside of their marriage. And I just think that is one
Wow.
of the most like incredible stories I've witnessed too, of just it's active forgiveness. It's also active love and active like, oh yeah, this is also my son. I'm also going to raise him as my own too. And so I think about her story often because I get salty around people. There's definitely people who push my buttons, but seeing that kind of grace and remembering her legacy that she left me, and it wasn't straightforward, it was just how she lived her life.
Mhm.
That's a huge value of mine, and that's why she's also one of my heroes.
Oh, wow. That's really beautiful because we can
Mhm.
always as you said, you can kind of look at these things from two different ways because some people would hear that story and wonder how she coped or like how could she do that or, because they're bringing
Totally.
with it their own story, but for her that probably was how she coped,
Mm.
right? By just like taking the kids in and just absolutely loving them.
Yeah,
And
just making them her own.
yeah, that's
Yeah,
beautiful.
yeah,
Hmm.
great thing. Who are your heroes, Bobby?
It's funny when you were saying that. I hope she doesn't ask. I was thinking, I hope she doesn't ask me. um, I think when I think about heroes, I think about like composite characters rather than specific people, but people who, and this is a big reason why I'm a documentary photographer. Um, People who are just unabashedly, unshamed, like unashamed completely living their life the way they want to on their own terms. And that doesn't mean at the cost of, because there are certainly characters who tell it like it is, and like it's not at the cost of other people. It's not cruelty, it's not a lack of kindness. It is just a utter confidence and acceptance of who they are and what they bring to the table. And so then there's no hiding, there's no shame, because I grew up around a lot of shame. That was like one of the main motivators in how my parents, bless them, how they parented. So to be around people that don't feel that is so enlightening for me, and like it just like lifts me up to think that there are people who don't feel like that. And that's what's so beautiful about documentary photography, is because there's no judgment. We're just presenting it the way it is. And people and like when we talked about beauty, people will see it and they will see that beauty in it because they will interpret it with their own lens, or their own universal experience. They'll be able to see it in there. If we're not hiding, if we're hiding things, or we're trying to be something that we aren't, you can sense it in there.
Totally.
Yeah.
Authenticity meter. I feel
Yeah.
like yours is probably, your radar is really strong, which also makes you a great noticer of people who are fully themselves, like
Yeah.
in their element, unashamed too, which is really interesting because it's also, I've seen of people, they often have a value because they didn't get that growing up, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
it was
Absolutely.
missing. And so you almost treasure it more and can appreciate more than someone maybe who was surrounded by that value, but because you didn't have that value, you have a
Mm-hmm.
deep appreciation and gratitude for it.
Yeah. Yeah. It can kind of go both ways when we look at it from like what we experienced as kids, right? Like kids who, maybe someone did grow up in a very like open and loving, not, I shouldn't put the word loving in there, but just a very, very open and honest, come as you are type of atmosphere. And that's what they bring forth in their life. And then there's kids that don't grow up in that, and that's what they seek in their life, like, I
Mm,
wonder what that is, like why some of us go for what we had and others go for what we didn't have.
totally. Yeah. I don't quite know the answer, but I can plus one to seeing the pattern there.
Yeah.
Why it happens, no clue. But I've seen in so many different aspects of, you even see that in people who they choose to have as a partner too, right? It's like kind of
Mhm.
either creepy of like, okay, you're kind of dating your parents, or
Yes.
it's like, wow, your parents are gonna hate this person. They're like, that's the point, you know? It's like they're the complete opposite.
Absolutely. Well, what's up next for Praise in the non hustle? I mean that in the most non hustly way possible.
Um, and I can say this because I wrote ish, by wrote ish, I mean, use copy.ai, thank God for AI too, to help start writing a sales page for things. But I can even see how much energy I have around editing it, which makes them like, oh, I'm not hustling for this. This just seems like fun. I'm planning a
Mhm.
retreat to Mexico City. Do you want to come to Mexico
What?
City, Bobby? Come on.
When?
Another part of North America. Let's go. We're going November 7th through 11th. So you still have like six
This
months to
year.
plan for it. Yeah. November. Do you
Oh,
have a wedding? Do you have what's going
I
on?
have two things up. Nepal, I'm running a stage race in Nepal, and then I'm going to shoot a wedding in Kenya.
Okay, so she's busy.
There's this stuff happening this fall.
It's so much going on, which I love. I love that energy. I have so many other follow up questions about that. But yes, this will be my first international retreat I'm planning. And I'm so
Oh,
excited because I just am blending a lot of the things I've gained from my own experience of going to retreats, of what was
yeah.
the perfect recipe of me actually coming back refreshed too, because that's what I want for attendees.
Yeah.
And also just kind of co-creating it with the women who are already on the wait list of like, okay, what is that balance of personal and professional development that you want? Like what kind of things would help foster
Hmm.
that too? And so yeah, booked a place. We have a chef lined up. We have some mindful movement in the morning, maybe a workshop. But then the key is having a lot of free time in the afternoon because it's such an amazing city to go to museums, to play,
Yeah.
to go eat out. Or for some people, I feel like they're just going to take some really long, well deserved naps in the afternoon. And then we'll reconvene around dinner, maybe do another workshop and do that for 3 or 4 days. Just like go, get
That's
energized, be
incredible.
re inspired.
Is this the first retreat that you are putting on?
So we've done day retreats like this in San Francisco where we use this framework called sweat, work, love, and play. And that, do you ever meet up with someone and they only ask about one thing? They either ask
Mhm.
just about your work or just about your relationship or something. And you're like,
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
have a lot
definitely.
of aspects to my life. And you have a lot of aspects to your life. I would love to catch up with you on all of them. And so this was something that has helped me when I'm catching up with a friend of like, sweat, what is going on in your health? Emotionally, physically, mentally, spiritually, like update me on sweat. And then work
Mhm.
could mean I have a lot of friends who are kind of in between too. So it's really, how do you spend your productive time? Are you caretaking for a parent or a child? Are you looking for a job? Are you running a business? Whatever that means for you, how are you spending that big chunk of like waking hours? And then
Mhm.
love could mean a significant other, but it really is relationships. How are you diving into community? How is your relationship with yourself? How is your relationship with inner circle? And then play is hobbies, fun. What are you doing that isn't supposed to be productive or checking things off your to do list? Are you staring out the window for an hour? Like, that's play. Like, tell me about these aspects of your life because I don't want to just overly focus on one. And that's what we've been doing here in San Francisco, is just giving women just a reprieve from busy city life. And it's just a very intentional day with all these great elements that you're focusing on, but with other women too. And so we are just taking it on the road now and doing it in a different city. And so I'm so excited about that, just because as much as I love teaching our small business owners about branding, entrepreneurs about what it is to live out their values, like how can we do that in all aspects of their lives too? That's what
Mhm.
something is. Yeah, it doesn't feel like work. It just feels really interesting to me right now.
Oh, I'm so stoked for, is it sold out? Can people
People can
um,
still come. Yeah,
well,
we are still on waitlist mode. So we actually haven't opened up the cart just yet.
okay.
So we'd be very excited to share, and we can share you the links. You can share it to your wonderful listeners.
Yeah, I'll
It'll
definitely
be a
share.
small group. There'll probably be only about 8 of us, which is about my capacity, honoring my limits of how many people I can lead. But this way, this is like the size of a dinner table, just enough people. We can have one conversation. I think it'll be really fun.
Mhm. That's incredible. What led you to retreats? From
I
from taking photos of snow globes?
I know, right? Snow globes too. I'm not sure if I would do a winter retreat. I don't do well in winter, by the way. I love
Snow
sun.
globe,
I
right.
love beautiful weather. That's more of my vibe. So I
Mhm.
don't need a toque or a toque, as you said.
I love
Full
it too.
circle.
Love it too.
Full
Yep.
circle. I do love a toque too, because it does keep my ears warm. But I wear a toque again in like California weather. So I'm not sure if I could deal
Yeah.
with like real toque weather.
Yeah.
Retreats kind of just were one of those things that it seems like the next eventual step of. So even our events here in San Francisco, Charge Up just came from me talking with a lot of my clients and my friends
Mhm.
and just caring for the people that we work with, serve with, do life with, and just asking people, what do women really need right now? They
Yeah.
need a break. They need a place where they can show up and they don't have to work and they don't have to pour out, but they can focus on what's important to them. And so that's how we kind of curated these events. And I know from experience that travel and an adventure can be really life giving. So, what if we do that same framework, but in a place with a lot of color and good food and great
Yeah.
museums and cool people? It seems like it'll be the perfect recipe.
Yeah. I am stoked for everybody who gets to go, and I will have to come on the next one.
Yeah.
Is it
Yeah.
in
I would
Mexico
love to.
City or is there a different city?
It's in Mexico City. Yeah.
Mhm.
So,
Okay.
big, beautiful city, not so hard to get to. Yeah. We'd love to
Yeah.
have you at the next one. But
I
when
would
you're
love to
not
be
like
there.
shooting a wedding in Kenya, or, okay, what is a stage race?
So
What do
I
you
run
mean?
like long distance races.
Oh,
And a stage race is a really long distance, but cut into shorter pieces over a certain number of days. So this one is, I think it's like 100 and it's a little over 100 miles, like 170 kilometers, I think, something like that, over 8 days.
wow.
And you're running like 25-ish K a day kind of thing.
Wow. That sounds delicious for you. Like, I like that for you.
I'm very excited. You know, it was interesting because it was always just something that I've always wanted to go to Nepal. Like since I first like looked in an encyclopedia what a mountain was. Like I'm totally dating myself. This was when like things when the internet was in books. Um and it's why I moved here and I but I just never thought that I would ever have the opportunity to actually go. Like, you know, sometimes you have a dream and you're like, it's a dream. Like that will never happen. So you kind of like put it up into this little pocket and just accept that that's what it is. And then a bunch of stars started aligning and I found this little piece of paper where I had written Nepal 2025 on a little like on a sticky. The mailman is here. We're just pausing for a break.
This makes sense. Got to take a break for Buddy's natural reactions to house guests. This is a universal intercontinental phenomena. The dog will always bark at FedEx, at UPS, at mailmen. It is part of the dog code. I understand this very much. This is also why I record these in a different place outside of my home because I would also have to be on mute most of the time because my dog is very reactionary.
Before like depending on when I need to like pay better attention to when the mailman is coming because they're quiet. The rest it's just the closer someone gets to the door, the louder and more frequent the barks are.
Makes sense.
But yeah, I had found the Nepal 2025 sticky note. And then I ended up booking a wedding in on the date of when Nepal could potentially happen. So I was like, oh, I guess like let's another like opportunity where I'm not going, you know? Like it almost felt like it was gonna happen. And then this other race popped up. And it was really like oddly affordable. Like so affordable that I didn't even question that it would be worth that, you know? And then I was like, oh, I guess I'm just like, it just felt so natural. It's like, oh, of course. And I don't have anything. I was planning to travel in November. Like I'm trying to travel 2 months of the year, April and November. And I'm like, this is perfect. So off to
I love
Nepal.
that. That just fell into place at just the right time.
Yeah, it really did. So very exciting.
What are the dates? We'll be sending you good vibes probably from California or
Um,
Mexico City.
it's the 7th. Everybody arrives on the 7th and we start on the 9th. And then the race is done on there's like a rest day or two. So the actual event is done on the 22nd. I think we're done racing on the 21st of November. So it's like about 2 weeks. Yeah.
Wow. That's going to
Yeah.
be amazing. Which, okay, this is so wild, but I had a dream about Mount Everest not too long ago.
Mm-hmm.
And that I was with a friend of mine who's also one of my favorite clients. I get to work with her a lot. And she's someone who really inspires me. And for some reason, she and I were like climbing Mount Everest.
Oh, wow.
And we were doing it together, but we realized we had toques and other gear from like Target or like a really kind of cheap, non-sporty,
Yeah.
scientific, place. And
Mm-hmm.
we're like, okay, we know that we can climb this mountain, but we just don't have the right gear for it. Like we
Yeah.
just don't have the right equipment. And so we go to, do you have an REI in Canada? It's just like our
We
sports
have
equipment.
mountain equipment co-op, but same thing. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So we like go to our equipment co-op here and my mom is there too. And she's cheering us on so much. And she wants to make sure that we have the right equipment to climb the mountain too. And so I woke up and I was like, well, I really do believe God gives us dreams like to tell
Yes.
you a little something. I'm like,
Yeah.
no one has to even translate that. That is something so clear. And I just feel as if for all my friends who are in business, it's that idea like you are so capable of this thing. There's no doubt about it. Sometimes we just need a little help along the way. We need frameworks and tools, or we need someone to come with us to the equipment store to help us just be like, these are
Yeah.
actually the running shoes you need, or this is the right toque that you need to get for this climb too. And so, yeah, I've just kind of been, again, when I spend an hour looking at the window, there's just some of the thoughts that cross my mind like,
Yeah.
this is a good reminder. I might not have the right equipment yet, But if I just get the right equipment, we can do this thing.
Praise, that is so beautiful.
I believe
One,
it for you too, Bobby. I'm claiming it. I'm claiming it.
well, you interpreted that metaphorically. If I had that dream, I'd be like, guess I got to go to REM, climbing Everest. Like, it's very
Well, because you
literally.
are actually going to that region of the world. So you actually can take it. And you probably do need to buy the right gear for your stage
I
race.
would get
So
it right here.
all the right things.
Praise, it has been awesome. Thank you for chatting with us today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It is a joy to share space with you.
Likewise. Okay, take care.
Take care. Bye.